digging around a little bit, came across a letter to the editor titled "The Supportive Spouse," written by Meacham Blockhead. He begins, "It is important for men to remember that as women grow older, it becomes harder for them to maintain the same quality of housekeeping as they did when they were younger. When men notice this, they should try not to yell. Let me relate how I handled the situation. When I got laid off from my job and took early retirement, it became necessary for my wife Marcy to get a full-time job, both for the extra income and for the insurance benefits. It was shortly after she started working at this job that I noticed she was beginning to show her age. I usually get home from hunting or fishing about the same time she gets home from work. Although she knows how hungry I am, she almost always says that she has to rest for half an hour or so before she starts supper. I try not to yell at her when this happens. Instead, I tell her to take her time. I understand that she's not as young as she used to be. I just tell her to wake me when she does finally get supper on the table. She used to wash and dry the dishes as soon as we finished eating. It is now not unusual for them to sit on the table for several hours after supper. I do what I can by reminding her several times each evening that they aren't cleaning themselves. I know she appreciates this, as it does seem to help her get them done before bed. Also, if I have a good day fishing, I allow her to gut and scale the fish at a more leisurely pace. Marcy is starting to complain a little occasionally. Not often, mind you, but just enough for me to notice. For example, she will say that it is difficult for her to find time to pay the monthly bills during her lunch hour. In spite of her complaining, I continue to try to offer encouragement. I tell her to stretch it out over 2 or 3 days. That way she won't have to rush so much. I also remind her that missing lunch completely now and then wouldn't hurt her anyway, if you know what I mean. When doing simple jobs, she seems to think that she needs more rest periods than she used to have to take. A couple weeks ago, she said that she had to take a break when she was only half finished mowing the lawn. I try not to embarrass her when she needs these little extra rest breaks. I tell her to fix herself a nice, big, cold glass of lemonade. While she's at it, get me one too. I tell her as long as she's making one for herself, making one for me makes sense, and she may as well take her break and sit and talk to me in my hammock while I fall asleep. I know that I probably look like a saint the way I support Marcy on a daily basis. However, guys, if you just yell at your wife a little less often because of this article, I will consider that writing it was worthwhile. Along with this came a clipping that Meacham's funeral was on a Saturday. And on the following Monday, Marcy was acquitted. We're talking about patience, and that's not the kind of patience we're talking about today. There are other ways to, certainly like Meacham, to appear to be patient, to think ourselves very righteous, but the kind of patience that God calls us to have, the kind that He commands and commends, is much more profound, and I think you've figured it out by now, a lot less selfish than Meacham's version. Would you turn with me to James, chapter 5? We're going to read verses 7 through 11 this morning. And patience is our spiritual gift of the month. It's the thing that we're looking at here in the Sundays of April. We've patiently waited for good weather, and now it's here, so that's another example, isn't it? waiting upon the Lord. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's patience and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven and by earth or anything else. Let your yes be yes, and your no, no, and you will be condemned. What we're going to see this morning is that patience makes all our relationships better. The message notes are in there on the purple sheet if you want to follow along with them. We see in this passage, James is teaching us that our lives require that we be patient with God, and that may sound a little bit like Nietzsche, like we're trying to make something of ourselves. But in reality, consider this, that we do have to wait upon God. One of the circumstances that we have to wait upon God is prayer. And we wait upon Him for an answer that we understand and perceive. We wait for God to say to us in a way that we can understand as yes or no, or even if God is saying, please go on hold, and wait a little while longer for yes or no to come. God always answers prayers, but we don't always feel like He answers them in the way that we'd like, in a timely fashion. Luke 18 instructs us to not stop praying, but to continue to call on the Lord as we await an answer. The second circumstance in which we wait upon the Lord, that we need to have patience in relationship with God, is to wait for the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's been promised since year one of the church, that Jesus is coming again, and there have been millions of believers who have lived and died and have not seen the second coming of Jesus yet. So that requires patience, doesn't it? It requires us to be patient, and in the meantime, it requires us to be prepared, to be ready to go with Him when Jesus comes again. And so James said very plainly, be patient until the Lord's coming. Our hope is that when He comes, our faith will be vindicated, wrongs will be made right, and losses replaced with rewards, that it'll be a great and wonderful day. Patience with God takes the form of standing firm. James calls us here in verse 8 to stand firm. That means to keep the faith, to resist the temptation, to compromise, to try to get along with the world by becoming more like the world, but instead to remain true to what we have received and the faith that has been passed on to us. And he offers as an example a farmer. And as we all know, farmers are the most patient people in the world, right? What are you saying, Russell? But farmers have to wait for the weather, they have to wait for the crops to mature, they have to wait on several things until they know months later whether or not their efforts will be rewarded with a harvest. James is saying, just as a farmer cannot determine when the rains will come, just as a farmer cannot speed up the growth process, so you and I must be patient. patient. And we need to understand that periods of waiting are not wasted time. Now, this is especially hard when you're waiting on a red light. Even then, it's not wasted time. Instead, periods of waiting, times when patience is required, are times of growth. And like a crop, God is maturing us during those moments. We're told to stand firm until the second coming. And it is near to us. God says it's at the door. The judge is at the door. And soon, all will be set right. True faith is distinguished by remaining true all the way until the end. The second thing second set of relationships in which we must be patient is with each other. And as follows then, the second coming, Judgment Day is also near. In verse 9, as I said, the judge is at the door. And one of the aspects, frankly, of the judgment that God is going to make of us is how we treat one another. In fact, Jesus said every word spoken in secret is going to be spoken on the rooftops. What we say and do and the effect that we have on one another is not just in the moment, but it's something that has eternal effect. And so James commands them in verse 9, don't grumble. Love that word. Grumble. That's one of those words in the English language that sounds precisely like the thing it's describing. James says, patience manifests itself in relationships, and patience will not allow you to grumble. Grumbling comes from impatience. Another aspect of Judgment Day will be on how we handle suffering. If we were patient in times of trial. And here he offers us another example, in fact, a set of two. He said, in times of suffering, think back to the prophets, the Old Testament figures, and how they stood in times of persecution and in difficulty. And without saying so, he refers us back to Hebrews chapter 11, where he says that some were tortured and refused to be released, that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, while others still were chained and put in prison. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. They were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of it. That's the lot of the prophets in the Old Testament. You say, well, I've suffered a lot in this life, but I haven't been sawed in half. I've faced difficulties, but I haven't been in prison. I haven't been placed in chains. I haven't had to wander in desert places. Maybe there's something I can learn. And then Job, in verse 11, of course, is the one we always refer to in times that patience is needed. Oh, he or she had the patience of Job. Well, Job was patient. James says that he persevered, and we go back to Job chapter 1, verse 22, and it says of this, in all the things that Job suffered, all the loss of life and property and suffering, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Job never sinned in the midst of all that he suffered. He had his doubts, yes, he had his struggles, certainly. Who wouldn't? But he remained faithfully stood firm. And so the outcome in Job 42, chapter 42, verse 12, the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. Now, we may not have triple the camels that we had before we started suffering, like Job did. That's okay. James says that we are considered blessed to have persevered. And that word blessed means happy. Those who persevere are happy because the Lord has been with us. Now, if we are patient in our experiences of suffering, however great or small they might be, in our trials, however brief or long they might be, we will see that the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Friends, at the end of the day, at the end of every day, it has to be about God. Our life experience needs to point us again to God and make us grateful for what God has done for us. The third and final thing this passage teaches us is how. How are we patient with one another? Well, he's already talked about grumbling, so we can put that on this list. But he goes on to say that patience is our first defense against ungodly anger. As patience allows us to slow down our reaction to offenses. James wrote to the brothers here in this passage, but then he expands this teaching to everyone. And he says, in effect, that all of us can benefit if we place a guard at our lips. And I want you to think of the guards out in front of Buckingham Palace. You know, they wear those really goofy hats, the really tall ones, like Fred Flintstone wore. And they stand at attention and they remain impassive. They're always alert and they're always on duty. And we need a big, strong guard at the entrance of our mouth. Because Jesus said, what goes into the mouth does not defile a person, but what comes out. Yikes. And so we need that guard there, not to keep things from getting in, but to keep things from getting out. So he's kind of the opposite guard of Buckingham Palace. His little station stands facing you instead of facing away from you. Look at verse 19. And here I believe you have the concise statement of what James's letter is all about. He has a threefold strategy for godly communication. Let's go over that quickly. Be quick to listen. Quick to listen to each other and to the Holy Spirit. And the object, the best use of our listening is to better understand the Word and the will of God. We help each other if we are quick to listen. Mark Twain said that if you listen and be silent, people will wonder if you're not very smart. If you open your mouth, you'll remove all doubt. Quick to listen. It's been often observed we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That should be about the proportions. Be slow to speak is his second strategy. And here we stop using excuses. I needed to let off steam. Friends, that does not come from the Bible. I'm just being honest. Sorry to disappoint, that is not found in the Bible either. To be slow to speak means that we take time to think. And scientists have taught us that quick reactions and angry responses are based on the construction of our brains, and it is literally the lower part of the brain that reacts quickly, that takes offense quickly. It's the higher part, the part that's closest to the top of your head, that does the thinking. And so we need to slow down, because quick responses are invariably going to be the wrong ones, but the slower, more considered ones, those are the ones we need to seek. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. When we're angry without reason, we hurt. We hurt ourselves and we hurt one another. And so if for no other reason than to avoid damage, let us be slow to become angry. Now, why is that a problem? Why single out ungodly anger? Well, it's the opposite of patience. It is quickly reacting, overreacting, reacting for the wrong reasons. And worst of all, James says, man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. People say, well, Jesus went in and cleared the temple of the money changers, and I want to say, do you think he did that on an impulse? Jesus went into the temple hundreds of times in the course of his life. Do you think that just one day he got mad all of a sudden? No. That was a demonstration. It was to make a point. He wasn't flying off the handle. Jesus considered and weighed the response before he acted. And all of us have had experience of something said in haste or something done in haste, and how it hurt. And how that hurt lasted a lifetime. James also warns us that ungodly anger is a sin. In fact, he says it's part of the moral filth and evil that is prevalent in the world. It is prevalent because most people are trying to get through their life without God. It takes a true follower of Jesus to be different from that. And what makes a true follower of Jesus? James tells us here, it is someone who has humbly accepted the word planted in them. Because I believe humility and patience are two sides of the same coin, aren't they? Impatient person tends to be an egotistical person who's focused on what they want, me. But a patient person is more likely to be humble and to put others before themselves. One scale on which we can assess our spiritual maturity is to the degree to which our words are either helpful or hurtful. On a personal scale, that means that whenever we speak, we're giving people away revelations of our character. What are they learning about us? On a church-wide scale, it means that we need to value the unity God gives us above self-interest, to humbly accept the word planted in us. I want to conclude this morning by showing you how to keep James 1:19. Not everybody likes peas. I do. In fact, if you've been to England and you've had mushy peas, that's just as good as it sounds. But I want to suggest to you a serving of peas. The first peas, and these are the peas that you need to serve up when there's problems between you and another person. The first P is to paraphrase. Tell them and use these words. This is what I hear you saying. And then repeat what they've said to you. Is that what you want me to hear? Paraphrase. We're attempting to clarify the words. Second P is to personalize. And ask this. When I hear you say that, this is how I feel. Is that how you want me to feel? And if there's an anger situation there, my guess is the answer is going to be no. What do you want me to feel? Paraphrase, personalize. The third is partner. What do you think we should do to resolve this situation? share ideas, negotiate a solution, achieve a compromise, whatever it takes to resolve the situation. Paraphrase, personalize, partner, and then lastly, perform. Work on the solution you've agreed upon. Don't just go back to the old way because the old way wasn't working. Take hold of the situation that you forged together through all the hard work of conversation and make it work in your relationship. If you can remember serving of peace when problems arise, God will be able to use that to make you quick to listen, slow to anger, and slow to speak. May God give us the spirit of patience. Amen. Seriously, I thought of just making the sermon way long in order to test your patience, but then I decided, not the right thing to do. Will you take your songbook, please, and we're going to ask Jesus to lead us out of this place. Lead us into life. Lead us into our homes, into our community, into our business. Lead on, O King eternal. 7:24. Would you stand?